After the assassination attempt on President Trump, the internet just exploded with speculation. But in all that chaos, two very different stories started to take shape. One was built on actual evidence. The other, well, that was a wild geopolitical fantasy. So let's dive into this, because knowing how to tell these two apart is an absolutely essential skill right now.
Think of this as a briefing, a guide for anyone trying to make sense of our crazy information environment. We're going to break down what actually happened, what the attacker himself said, and what was completely made up. Our goal here is to separate the hard facts from the fiction that went viral.
Now, to get the clearest picture possible, we're going to do this a little differently. We're starting with the conclusion first. We're going straight to the most important piece of evidence, the attacker's own words, to lock down his motive before we even touch all the noise that came later.
And here it is. It really doesn't get more direct than that. The attacker, Cole Thomas Allen, he left writings that made his personal feelings crystal clear. There's no talk of geopolitics, no mention of oil, no grand conspiracies, just pure, raw, personal hatred aimed at one man. So the bottom line is this. Every single piece of credible information, whether it's from law enforcement or from the attacker's own manifesto, it all points to the exact same place. This was an act driven by domestic political anger, period. It was not part of some shadowy international plot. Okay, so now let's ground ourselves in the actual facts of what happened that day. Building on a solid foundation of what we know is true is the only way we can properly take apart the misinformation that followed. Let's walk through the timeline. Things moved incredibly fast. The attack happens around 8:36 p.m. Less than an hour later, the president himself confirms a lone actor was caught. By 10:30 that night, the FBI's initial findings backed that up completely. So the official story, the one based on what happened at the scene, was established very, very quickly. And what about the attacker himself? Who was this guy? Cole Thomas Allen was a 31-year-old engineer, no criminal record. He'd made a small donation to a Democratic PAC and had this bizarre self-description as a friendly federal assassin. His profile lines up perfectly with the official motive, a politically radicalized guy with a personal grudge, not some pawn in a global chess game. So you have to be asking, right, if all the evidence was so clear and pointed in one direction, where on earth did this other story come from? Well, this is where things get interesting. An entirely separate and totally baseless theory gets yanked from the dark corners of the internet and just slapped onto this tragic event. And here it is. The petrodollar theory. It's this fringe idea that's been kicking around for a while. It basically claims that the U.S. secretly pulls strings all over the world, even manipulating its own leaders, to make sure oil is always traded in U.S. dollars. It's a classic conspiracy narrative, and in this case, it was just sitting there, waiting for a crisis to latch onto. When you put the two side by side like this, it's pretty stark. On one side, you have the official motive, based on the attacker's own words and solid police work. And on the other, a complex geopolitical theory pulled from social media noise and, as we're about to see, foreign propaganda. So if you're an analyst, this is where the rubber meets the road. You have to weigh the evidence. Let's put these two claims head to head and see what actually holds up under scrutiny. I mean, just look at this matrix. It couldn't be clearer. For the anti-Trump motive, you have the shooter's own manifesto. Solid evidence. For the other theories, like immigration or the petrodollar, you've got anonymous internet posts and chatter from totally unrelated discussions. The refuting evidence is overwhelming. The shooter's own writings never, not once, mention immigration, oil, or global currency. The evidence just isn't there. It's a void. And that brings us to the real million-dollar question for anyone worried about domestic stability. If the petrodollar theory had zero evidence, why did it spread like wildfire? You see, understanding the mechanics of how a lie travels is just as important as debunking the lie itself. It turns out there's a pretty clear four-step playbook here. First, the petrodollar story was already being pushed by Iranian and Russian state media, but about a totally different topic. Second, social media accounts that thrive on conspiracy theories grabbed it and amplified it. Third, and this is the key move, the story was completely stripped of its original context and just pasted onto the shooting. And finally, the social media algorithms did the rest, pushing this emotionally charged, sensational content out to millions. This is so crucial to understand. The lie didn't spread because it was believable. It spread because the ground was already fertile. While the shooter's actual motive was his anti-Trump rage, the misinformation took root in a political climate where deep divisions on other hot-button issues like immigration already existed. A good conspiracy theory doesn't need evidence when it can tap into existing distrust. All right, let's boil all this down. What does this all mean for an analyst who's trying to track the information landscape and its impact on stability? What are the key lessons we need to walk away with? So to wrap up, here are the big takeaways. First and foremost, always go to the primary source. The attacker's own words are your strongest signal for motive. Second, realize that misinformation is often just recycled. It's an old narrative repurposed for a new crisis. And remember that foreign propaganda can absolutely become the seed for a domestic conspiracy theory. It's vital to be able to separate the general political mood from the specific, evidence-based motive of one person. And this leaves us with a really critical question, doesn't it? This whole incident was a case study in fact versus fiction. But as these two things fight for our belief in real time, online, every single day, it forces us to ask, what's the long-term price we pay for this? How is our stability affected when the line between what's real and what isn't becomes so dangerously blurred?